Begin the current Daf Yomi the Shabbos Daf Pei Hey. Begin in the second line down at the top of the Amud, in the middle of the discussion regarding explaining the halacha of the Mishnah. We had a very interesting Mishnah, which is in the series of these, the theme of these Mishnahs regarding Minayin, regarding certain rabbinic laws that are learned out from a smachtas, they're allusion from a pasuk. We had this halacha regarding how do we know that you could have a vegetable, a garden patch at 6 by 6 tvachim, that you could plant 5 different types of seeds inside of it, which generally there's a concern about kalayim. So we said that there's a certain configuration that's not going to be a concern, and that's where our Gemara is going to continue on the theme of the halacha. So Hashem Kospans Lekazach in Yecheskel, Torah anytime, Daf Chaim, Zoom that's joining us. So the idea that we have from the previous daf, which is continuation of this daf, is that there's the problem of kalayim, we said, is not really that they nourish from the same source. It's really that they look like they're mixed together. And you have to have it that it doesn't look like it's mixed together. It has to be obvious that it's two different things. And if it's obvious two different things, even if it's very close, then it's going to be permitted. Now, there's two different ways. Either that they're going in different directions. So if you have those going, running from north to south, the ones running from east to west, even though it's very close, it can be connected, because that really looks like the same thing. But even though you don't have really such a distance, as long as you don't have the corners filled in, that's going to be okay. Now, additionally, we said, let's say like the middle type, which it's not so recognizable as something different. You don't see a different direction in the center. So then we said we have to have a distance of 3 tvachim because of the nourishment actually does go that distance. If you have the distance of the nourishment, then it's also obvious it's something else. So there's two different ways that we described. That was the halacha of the Mishnah. You could have one seed here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that would be number 5. These are all different because you could tell that they're considered separate entities, not like rows in the same direction, they're all different. And this middle one, because it's a distance of 3 tvachim from all the ones on the side. So that's where we begin the current daf. The Gemara continues now on this halacha. So we know that there could be 5 different seeds, and you're telling me it's in 6 by 6 tvachim based on the interpretation we just gave you. But that the Gemara asks, from where do we know the hodikim and this that the rabbis they know this? The chamisha b'shita that the amount of the nourishment is going to be, you could have 5 different seeds in the measurement of 6 by 6 tvachim. From where do we know the milsi that's considered significant that you can rely on that, and to say that the sages are sufficient of that they're agriculturally wise, that they know how much is the distance of nourishment? Because you're going to wonder, say, wait a second, who told people that that's how far it nourishes from the ground, and that you could ascertain that and know that? Yes, I understand the one about that the different directions, that okay, I could understand. But how do you know that you could have 5 in because the middle one is 3 tvachim? Who said that it's a tefach and a half that it nourishes on each one to say that each one is stopping before reaching the other one? Who said the sages are knowledgeable enough that we should rely on that to tell you that you could have that in that area? So it says the Gemara, yes, because the Amar B'chia Bar Abba Amar B'yechna says, my dechsiv, he says, what does it mean the pasuk in Devarim? It says, Leisasik gvul re'acha, don't go over the boundary of your friend, which in this context is that to plant something near his boundary, to weaken his ground, like the measurement Asher Gavlu Rishonim that the early ones had marked out. Meaning the simple translation of this is that don't move the boundary of your friend, which is that if his property line ends over here, don't go past that and take that over. But the way the Gemara is expounding it is, but who's these Rishonim? What do you mean Asher Gavlu Rishonim that the early ones had done? So the Gemara is going to explain it's going on the Amoyim and the Chivim that they were Bekiyim, and they were from the Bnei Seir, like the Gemara explains. It's the Gevul Shekav L'Rishayim, it's the boundary that the early ones had made. The earlier generations, before the Jewish people came to Eretz Canaan, Loi Sasid, don't go beyond that, which we're going to say in the context of Klein. My Gavul L'Rishayim, what did the earlier ones boundary that they make? So Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, and it says, the Pasuk says in Bereishis, it says, Eila Bnei Seir HaChayri. Way before the Jewish people came, the Rishayim, the sons of Seir HaChayri, they were Yeshvei Ha'aretz. They were the settlers of the land. So the Gemara says, I know they're going on SpaceX now. It's supposed to be going up today, actually, to up into the sky. Right? But everyone else lives up in the sky? What do you mean they're Yeshvei Ha'aretz? We're all Yeshvei Ha'aretz. Ella rather says the Gemara, they were proficient, they were knowledgeable in the settlement of the land. What does that mean to say? They said, Mole kana zeh, a reedful, a tubeful of this earth is good like fanim. Malkal zeh is it's like a measurement of a reed, which that's how they would use to measure the ground. a reedful of this earth is good l'gzayis, is good to grow olives. Moli kanazeh, a reedful of this earth is good l'gfanim, it's for grapevines. Moli kanazeh l'teinim, a reedful, which is like a measurement of this type of earth, is good for figs. Meaning they know how to differentiate in the earth between measurements of earth in its smell, in its taste, two things that many people have lost. They knew these two things, what's good for olives, what's good for figs. And therefore, since they obviously were so proficient in the earth, they were proficient in knowing the measurement of its nourishment. And therefore, since we see that the early ones had that, the sages had that tradition of that. You see people are so knowledgeable in the earth that they knew also then the nourishment, how that went. And we see that in the words of the Pasuk, describing those from the Eretz Canaan, v'chayri is shemerichem es haaretz, where sometimes you could have a word, like Rashi says, you switch around the letters and it's really the same word. Chayri, or switch the resh before the ches, so then it's reichi, which is the smell, that there was smell of the land. And from smelling it, they knew what it was good for. And the chivi, which Tesa points out that this is referring to the sons of Seir, they were called chivi, as we find about Sivan Achivi. This doesn't refer to the chivi of the Sheva Amman, because that we're not expounding at all. We're talking about the people of Seir, but they were also called, why were they called chivi? So Amar Papa says, show you toyim in the arts, because they used to taste the land to see what it's fit for, kichivya, like a snake. A snake is called chivya, and a snake eats earth. That's why they were called chivi, like a chivya, like a snake, because again, they would taste it, and from tasting, they were able to say, this earth is good for this. And you see the real, probably I don't know, the guys with the wine, if they do the same thing, you could see these guys that they taste the earth, they smell, okay, this is good for this type of wine, or whatever. So, and that's what they said, that they malikanazel likfanim. And so too, a different interpretation, he says, chayri, why were they called chayri? Shenasu b'nei chayrim b'nechseihem. This for a different reason. He says they were called chayri. They became free men from their properties, meaning they were chased away from their inheritance. They didn't have to work their land anymore, like it says in the pasuk in Devarim. B'nei Esav Yerusham. The sons of Esav inherited the Seir. So the people from Seir, they were the ones that were called for a different reason. He says they were called chayri because they became b'nei chayrim. They didn't own their property anymore. The sons of Esav took them over. So again, that's just explaining up until this point. How do we know to rely on this measurement that the sages tell us, which is only alluded to in the pasuk? It's only an allusion, but really it's a rabbinic law to have this 5 different seeds in 6 by 6 tvachim. Is because yes, they were sufficient. They knew the knowledge that it goes up until a tefach and a half, which then you could have a distance of 3 tvachim in the middle to the sides on all 4 sides. You have the 4 on the sides, you have the 1 in the middle. You could have 5 in that thing. Now, continue on the explanation of the halacha of our Mishnah. So Amar Vasi says aruga. This that he says regarding the patch that we spoke about in the Mishnah, that it has to be this area of 6 by 6. So he says it has to be toichavav. It has to be that the inner part of the field is 6 by 6 tvachim, chutz migvuleha, except for the boundary, which we're going to shortly explain in the Gemara. In a garden patch, they would leave open part of the land around where you planted in each patch, so that you could walk around when you're watering the seeds. That's called the boundary. The person's walking around, and he would have to water the patch that's inside. They would leave, that's called the gvul. And now Rashi coming to tell us, don't think that when we said that the patch is 6 by 6, it means, besides, as we're going to shortly explain, that the boundary is a tefach on either side. Besides that empty space, we're going to tell you that the patch is 6 by 6, meaning to say, if you're taking away, as we're going to see that it's a tefach of the boundary that you make where you have to walk around, then you're actually left with the actual patch itself as only area of 4 by 4 tefachim. If you take away a tefach here and a tefach here, and you're talking about basic math, about squaring the area, if this is 6 by 6 the whole thing, you take away tefach here and tefach here, you're left with that 4 by 4 area of the patch itself. Then you would only have a distance from the middle one to the sides of 2 tefachim, which would only give you each one going a tefach. Then they actually would be going and sharing each other's nourishment. You wouldn't have that differentiation of being that distance. Don't say that. He says, no, it's chutz mikvaleha. It's going to be besides the borders. The borders are not counted from that. The area of 6 by 6 we're talking about is the patch itself. And Tanam Achasim in the Brayso, aruga, the patch, is toicha shisha, is that this inner part of the actual vegetation is 6 by 6, again, besides the gvul. It says the Gemara, gvuleh b'kama. How much is the width of this, the boundary? Now, what does that mean? Halacha regarding the boundary? So Rashi explains yes, because to be considered halachically like a patch, to have all the halachas of a patch, which we're going to see later on, that there are certain possibilities of what's called reish toyer. If you have a certain type of an angle that comes in from one patch into another patch, then actually if it's recognizable that's from another patch, even though it's literally inside the other one, but you see like, let's say a diagonal, it's called like the head of an ox, which is a certain shape, goes in, we're going to say it's not a problem by Kalayim. That's only if it has a measurement of being considered like a Sada. But if it doesn't have that measurement, that required entity, like certain laws, like we have regarding zoning laws, we have those types of things, it's not, halachically, it's not going to be considered as an aruga or a Sada. So therefore, we're trying to define how much is the gvul to know what would qualify it as a aruga to be part of a Sada, because if it doesn't have that, it won't qualify it as a Sada. And it's not going to have those leniencies of a Sada. So how much does the boundary have to be? Says the Gemara, Kitnan, like within the Mishnah, this Klein. Yudaim, he says, Reichev, the width of this boundary, the border of the patch, has to be Kamaloi Reichev Parsa. Has to be like the width of the sole of a person's foot, which is a tefach. And Omar B'Zeira, V'Itam, some say, Chanin Bar Papa, says, my town, what's the reason? Where does he get this from? How does he know that there's such a halacha that you have to have the width of the boundary of the border to be a tefach? So it says the Gemara, because the Chesiv, it says a pasuk in the Var. It says v'shkisa b'raglecha, you're going to water by foot, which is that you're going to load on the water on your shoulder, and you're going to go by foot around the field to water it, kigan hayerik, like a vegetable garden. Now, what we see over here, why does it have to say you go by foot? What are you bringing the word foot for? It's coming to tell you that the space of going by foot to water it is going to be the measurement of a person's foot. Ma regel, just like a person's foot, the width is a tefach, is a handbreadth. Of gavul nami tefach, so to the border is going to be a tefach. So that's how we know that, like we said, the border is going to be a tefach, but the 6x6 is not the whole area including the border. It's inside that it's going to be 6x6, and then you're going to have a distance of 3x3 from the middle one and the ones on the side. Now the Gemara makes another qualification regarding the halacha of our Mishnah. Amarav. He says, aruga, this halacha that we said regarding the aruga that you could have in the configuration that we described, is specifically b'chur v'shanino. Was talking about in a ruined area to tell you when we said you're allowed to have 5 different types of seeds, this is the only patch in the whole area. But not that you're surrounded with other patches in a large field with this patch. Because what the Mishnah was only telling you was the area of the distance of the seeds inside of it. But let's say you're going to plant other patches around it, then you're not going to be able to go and do the distances like we described in the Mishnah for this halacha of the border to the middle ones, according to the measurement that we described it, to make that distance, if you can have other patches around it. Because if you can have other patches around it, you're going to run into a problem. What's going to happen is, so you're going to have the border of every one, like we said. So this is going to be 6x6. Let's say this is the case we described in the Mishnah, which it is. So he says that you have the tefach squared around it of the border. That means everyone else, every other patch is the same way. The problem is, if you're looking at this, you see that there's only, if every square is a tefach, you see there's only a distance of 2 tefachim from this patch to this patch to this patch. You're not having the requisite shit. This looks like a row, right? It's rows. And you said the only way it's going to be considered differently if it's at least 3 tefachim distance. If it's a different direction, okay, great. So that we can tell it's different. It's a different entity. But here, we said it's only if it's going to be, if it's, let's say, running the same direction, it's only be good if it's 3 tefachim away. This way, because of the 2 borders that you have on either one, it's only 2 tefachim. I need 3 tefachim. You can't do this. So says Rav, the halacha of the Mishnah was only being said if it's out in the wild. There's no other. There's a ruin. There's no other patches. If you were surrounded by patches, halacha of the Mishnah is not going to work because it has the problem about the other patches. That is the Gemara. What's pushing Rav that he's not explaining the halacha of the Mishnah? That it is like normally you have a field, a patch amongst other patches, surrounded on, let's say, what Rashi calls all 3 sides, which are going to be 8 patches, but we're just showing it as like 9 patches, which our Gemaras also have those pictures. But yeah, you're going to plant in the middle, and by all of them, you're going to have 5 different seeds. Because what's the Gemara's question? But va'iko, you have in every single patch, mokum kronis, which Rashi explains the Gemara's question is, you have the corners, meaning to say, what does that mean you have the corners according to Rashi? The Gemara's question is, you could do the following configuration. It's not like we had described in the up until now that that's going to be the halacha of the Mishnah as you see this picture. Rather, the Gemara is asking like this configuration. What you could do is you could pull the seeds of every side that it should be one more towards the north, the other one next to it more towards the south. And the other way that you have it, let's say one's going to be towards the east and one's going to be towards the west. And you could plant that seed when it says mokum kranis, it means that you can plant it near the corners. And you don't have to have it that is directly opposite the other one. And additionally, it's going to be 3 tvachim from its inner one. So essentially, the way the Mefarshim explain what the Gemara is asking is like this. What you have is, so yeah, you're right. You have 2 tvachim from between every single of these patches. But if you look at the way we're describing this, we don't really have it any one across the other one. Because this one is towards the east, and this one's towards the west. This one's towards the north, this one's towards the south. So you don't really have anyone directly opposite the other one. Now there is a difficulty, but the way they describe it is how you're getting 3 tvachim. So they say it's a tefach this way, and 2 tvachim this way. So that's 3 tvachim. You see that neither one of them are really having exactly, so you could have, you could have every one of these patches, 5 different seeds, and the area is 6 by 6 tvachim, and it's aruga bein arugas. Because makom kranis, again, the way Rashi explained the Gemara's question is, you can move it towards the corners, shift it towards the corners. You don't fill up the whole thing, but then you won't have directly opposite the other one. You'll have 2 tvachim this way, another tefach this way, you have 3 tvachim. That's the Gemara's question according to Rashi. And it'll be able to be aruga bein arugas. So that... Right, so that, yes, well, which alachsan?
It's not really 3, that's what he's saying.
Right, it's not really 3. That's what they say. It's really the reichev tefach. There's different interpretation of the version. I just picked the simplest one to try. But it's difficulty. They have difficulty with this interpretation. We'll see in the Amid Beis also there's certain times it seems like they let you have 2 tvachim if there's something else there. There's a Chazon Ish in Amid Beis also. We'll see there's something else that it's also going to be 2 tvachim. The Chazon Ish explains it that because there's this other element too. Okay, so that works. So here also, since it's not directly opposite it, like we said, it's not really als Yanika really. There's another element over here if it's considered separate. So here also, because it's here and this is here, you got 2 tvachim in, you got over here also the tefach over here. So therefore, you have the 3 tvachim, and therefore the Gemara is asking that should be sufficient. Why does he have to go ahead and say it's not aruga ben arugas? So that Amid Bei Rav, Mishmei de Rav, so the yeshiva of Rav, they said the name of Rav. That you know why Rav explained it the way he does is because he explains the halacha of the Mishnah that it's b'mamales akronis. It's talking about that they filled up the corners, meaning the way Rashi explains it that on let's say on the northern side they filled up the whole row. This is although the picture is showing east and west, the way Rashi explains it is really north and south. But be that as it may, it's that it fills up the whole row on the north going from east to west, and also the southern one, it fills up the whole thing. But, as we see in the picture, and there's a discussion in the Mefarshim, is this really how it's supposed to be, but we'll go like the way our Rashis have it, is that on the east and the west, again, this looks like north and south, but Rashi is describing east and west, is you plant just a little bit, and you have space from either side. So therefore, okay, for our halachic purposes, see, the reason why we're describing it is like this. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing like we always did? The reason why we're doing like this is because if we go and fill up this whole thing, so that's a problem, because that looks like it's one field. We were always describing that we left open the corners, even though it wasn't 3 tvachim. Okay, you could tell it's different. One's going north to west, one's going south, one's going north south, one's going east west. But here, we specifically explaining that you're filling up the corners. The reason why we're doing that is because we're saying, yeah, you got to fill up the whole row. Now you can't have another row next to it because there's no. It's going to be 2 tvachim whichever way you look at it. So because of that, we can't go and plant it all the way anymore. It's okay. Some of us want to say that it doesn't mean you plant it a little bit. It's that you leave over a little bit. But be that as it may, you can't plant anymore now really so much because it can't go because this is filling up all the way to the corner. You can't really say that, okay, we're going to just leave the corner because we're filling up all the way to the corner, so you can't really go all the way till here. It really looks like the same thing. Then you're going to have 3 tvachim difference. So because of that need to have 3 tvachim difference, you could still have the 5 different types in 6 tvachim. How so? You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And because it's that type of a case, the Mamales Akron is because the guy went to fill up the whole row, including the corners. So that's it. You can't do any more aruga ben arugas. Because what are you going to do over here? Even if, let's say, this field on the sides of it, you only do partial, it's going to be 2 tvachim on the side of it, so you're stuck. You don't have any more like we said, al-lachs, and you don't have any more of that 3 tvachim, that configuration anymore. So because that's the case that's talking about, so that's why you can't plant it aruga ben arugas, and therefore it's going to be only in a churva, in a destroyed area. On that, the Gemara asked. Again, this is all Rashi interpretation. There's difficulties in Rashi, but it says, Velizim Avroi. Says, I don't understand. What are you talking about, Mamale Sakranis? plant rows on all sides, on the outside, and don't plant the whole inside. Meaning, don't fill up the corners. In other words, the way Rashi explains the question is, why did Rav do this? Why did he tell us it's aruga, the shebechurva, it's the only aruga around, and because it's mamalas akranas, why are you explaining mamalas akranas? And therefore you have to tell me that it's aruga shebechurva. Who pushed you to do that? Why didn't you just say it's aruga ben arugas and it's not mamalas akranas? And then you could have as Taisa says, and that's better because then you can have many more rows and many more patches. The Mishnah is trying to tell us like a leniency, right? It's trying to tell how much you could get in. Don't worry, you could get this in. You get 5 different types in 6 tvachim. So say it's aruga ben arugas. You could do this for a whole field. Why telling me it has to be bechurva because you filled up the sides? Don't fill up the sides. What pushed Rav to do that?
Same question you could have. Why does it have to be a tefach around? They got 2 tvachim, 2 and 2.
We 2 tvachim where?
What around the field you say is a tefach, right?
Yeah, no, that we learned from a pasuk. The border.
That's the minimum, but you can make it bigger.
Yeah, but then that's not a chiddush. Of course you could have, but then that's not how fields usually work. Because usually you have a patch, you have a border that's a tefach. So that's what I'm saying. That's usually how a field's going to be. No one's wasting space. Usually you have a field that you have patches, you have a border of a tefach. The rabbis require a tefach, okay, shteit and pusik, but more than that we're not doing. So that's what he says. Of course, that's what bechurva meaning shanina really means. Bechurva means to say there's nothing really around. Well, of course I can have a patch 10 tvachim down, whatever. I'm saying, but that's what I'm saying, not having the normal style. Who pushed Rav to say that? So nothing more continuing on Beis says that the reason for this is because it's a gezer. It's a rabbinic concern. Shemi amalas akranis. You're right. Rav says, yeah, of course I could have explained that case. But I'm not saying that it's bein arugos. Because I'm not letting this. I mean, not him, he's explained this is what the halach is, of having aruga bein arugos. Because what happens is you might fill up the corners. Yes, you might actually make what, let's say, would be a permitted way to not do that it's crossing each other. And then the problem is, you're going to go ahead and then plant the other one, another patch around it on the side. And you can do the same configuration, and you're not going to pay attention to realize, hey, wait a second, then now it's mixing up the 2 patches. So because of the concern that you might go up and fill up the sides and then do patches around it, that's why. But you're right, of course you could do that. But Rav says the halacha doesn't allow that because we're concerned that you might go ahead and then, it's a waste of space of it, fill it up, and then, oh, look at that, you're doing Klayim. So because of that concern, we don't let them. But then the Gemara asks a different question. It says that V'lo yehei ela rosh tar yerek. Wait a second. This should be, a halacha we'll discuss in the next daf, what's called the head of the ox of vegetables. What it means to say is, the Gemara's question is, even if you fill it up, the whole patch, and then you go ahead and you plant one seed, let's say, in the neighboring patch, and let's say you're right, there's no distance between it and the other patch more than 2 tvachim. And that says, Rashi, the way he explains the Gemara's question is, who cares? It should be like rosh tar yerek, which means to say that if, let's say, it's going from one field to another field, Rashi explains that you could tell, you could discern, you could differentiate that what's from one patch and what's from the other patch. Why is it recognizable? Like we said, we're not really concerned about that it nourishes. We don't care. It's recognizable because what's this rosh tar? Rosh tar is the way it used to be by their fields. Is that again, it depends how exactly you would describe this. But every square really has a diagonal on the end. But the point is their field would end on an alachsen, like some Gemaras have it, like you see what would be considered the head of a fox, which is wide in the back and narrow in the front. So you see if you look in your Gemaras and Rashi, you see like a diagonal, like a triangle. So when the field ends, so let's say you're right, doesn't have a distance of 2 tvachim, but the field ends on the diagonal. And the problem is, didn't we learn the Mishnah Masechtas Klayim that says, "Hayirosh tar yerek nichnas l'tech sada acher." Let's say you have what's called the rosh tar. We're not going to translate anymore the head of the ox. It's called rosh tar, of vegetables that goes into another field. It's mutter. It's going into the other field. 2 different types of species. Is that a problem by Klayim? No, it's permitted. You know why? It's mutter. You could tell that this is the end of one field. So though it's going into another patch, into another field, it's okay. Because the whole idea is hecker, recognizable that it's 2 different things. So it doesn't make a difference if it's going in, because it's rosh tar. So that has to Gemara, so forget about it. Even if, let's say, you're going to have that there's no 2 tvachim, but again, you see the picture here is not telling us the honest truth, but it sounds like that some way the field, the way it would end, would not be like this, but it would end on like a rosh tar. It would have a diagonal on the end. And the point is is that since you have that Rosh Tar, even if it went into, we'll discuss on the next daf, that it goes into the other field, that itself would be permitted because it's recognizable from a different field. So if that's the case, so you should have that over here too. What's the problem? Because it's not two tvachim, it doesn't make a difference. It could even go into the other patch because the field would end on the Rosh Tar, would end on a narrowing. They wouldn't just have in this perfect direction over here.
The whole idea is two things. One's unique and one's that it looks like kilayim.
Well, yeah, or you could say the other way. Either that it's not Yonik, or it's recognizable, it's from a different entity.
So how much is going to be the idea of unique?
Right, Yonik is 3 tvachim.
So if unique is 3 tvachim...
But that's not a problem, we don't care about Yonika really. We only use non-Yonika as another way of differentiating and showing it's something else. So either you could have non-Yonika, which is 3 tvachim, or as long as it's recognizable that it's from a different entity. So the Gemara, I don't know if I understand exactly the mitzvahs, but the Gemara is saying that the way the fields would end would be on a diagonal. So if that's the case, so I could tell what's, like when you have something like, some people have their haircut also, you could tell where's the end, like it's ending off, right, tapering off. So it sounds like that the field's tapered off. It would be your Rosh Tur. You could tell when it was ending off. So then this is like So I know anyways that it's something different. So who cares? I don't need the 3 tvachim and the element. Just like over here, you don't need the 3 tvachim because you can tell it's different. Here also a different patch. You can tell where the patch is tailing off. So I know that this is the end of it. So what's this about that it's near 2 tvachim? That's the Gemara's question. So the Gemara says, Ain, you don't have the halachic heter of Rosh Tar ba'aruga, by a patch. From one patch to another patch, you're not going to say that. From a large field to a patch, from a patch to a large field, from a large field to another large field, that's when you'll say the halachic leniency of Rosh Tar. But 2 patches, it's not recognizable. That looks like one, and even though let's say it would taper off, it doesn't make a difference. It would be considered as one entity, and that's why it would still be forbidden. And therefore Rav says, no, it has to be b'chur v'shaninu. It cannot be aruga bein arugas. This was all in Rav's interpretation. Shmuel, he disagrees. He says, no, aruga ben aruga shalina. The halacha of a Mishnah that we say this whole halachic leniency of having 5 different seeds in an area 6 by 6 doesn't have to be just in a churva by itself. It could be surrounded by other patches. On that, the Gemara asked the question we asked before on Rav. What do you mean? Rashi here explains a little bit differently than he explained before. Is that the leaves of this patch are going in the leaves of the other patch on the top. So because since there's only a distance of 2 tefachim by the borders, so they look like they're mixing together, whether it looks like it's mixing underneath, or the way Rashi is saying over here on the top. The Mefarshim discussed that discrepancy in Rashi. But the point is, you have that, it's getting mixed. What does that mean? Didn't we say if either has to be some sign, let's say different direction, or unique, and here it's only 2 tefachim distance. Says the Gemara, B'nait shur lakan. Somehow we are drawing a road this way, v'shur lakan, and a road this way. Now, although the wording actually sounds like as if this is something new we didn't hear up until now, the way Rashi explains is exactly what we had said for Rav originally. The question we had asked on Rav is actually Shmuel's interpretation. One row, it's being pulled towards the northeast, and that of the other direction is pulled towards the southwest. And all of them are distancing them, that it's not going to be opposite the other one, which is exactly like the question we had asked of Malcolm Kronis. This is how Shmuel's describing the case. The Gemara was asking, well, and the Gemara says that this is the case. Rav's case is Shmuel's case. And what the way Rashi explains is that Shmuel does not have the gezer of Shemimal Kronis. And therefore that's how he explains the Gemara over here, that Kronis is not like some other Pshatim Rashi says that someone explained. He says this exactly the way Shmuel understands it. The reason why you could have a ruga ben arugas is because you're not going to have 2 tefachim. You'll have the 2 tefachim this way. You'll have the tefach this way, which is really, it is a distance of 3 tefachim. If you think about it, it's 2 tefachim here and 1 tefach here. So not really balachsan. Okay, it's 3 tefachim. Be that as it may, that's the interpretation. And so therefore, it's not going to be Misar Dadi. It's not going to be Klein because you have the 3 tefachim. And that's what the Gemara is saying for Shmuel, that it doesn't hold the Gzera of Rav. That's essentially the way it comes out according to Shmuel. So Gebir, Ruga ben Arugas. And when I concerned, you might come to fill it up. Now, the Gemara continues, Amar Uli says, Baibim Arav in the west, and Eretz Yisrael, they had the following question. Hifkiya, which Rashi explains the word Hifkiya means like that of tearing. You rip up the ground, like we find in the Gemara Sukkah that they used to take the worn out garments of the Kanhoyim Hafkin, they would tear it and they would use it to light the fires. So if Hifkiya Telem Echad, if you tear up one furrow, Pnei Kula, on the whole field, which is, where Tais explains that it's a tefach deep, you're going from, let's say, from the seeds on the north, going all the way down to the seeds of the south, through the middle of the patch. And you plant it, let's say, from one of the different types that you already have, or from a sixth type. What's the halacha? The question is, do we say that that nullifies the halacha of the row because of this one patch that's not going to have a distance of 6 tvachim, or not? Would it not be a problem? So it's actually machlekes. Amar Sheish, he says, bo irviv. So this that you're mixing in another type, well, bitlas shiur, it ruins the order. It's going to be usher because you don't have you don't have anymore an area of 6 tvachim, because this thing is wider than just the seed itself, and this is not going to have more. It's not going to have the 3 tvachim anymore of a distance, and because of that, it's going to be forbidden. Rav Asi, he says no. Any ruvim mevatlas shiur. He says no. That the mixture is not ruining up the order. He considers it. First, we discuss exactly what is the machlekes of it. He says, considers it like you could see it's its own entity. This deep furrow that was torn into the middle of the field. He says that's not problematic, and therefore that would be permitted. Not clear exactly, but that's the machlekes. He says not because you don't have the ear. He says no. You can tell it's its own. You rip up a whole furrow. It's a tefach. It's not going to be a problematic. On that opinion of Rav Asi, Esri Ravina Rav Ashi. So Ravina asked Rav Ashi from the following Mishnah Masechtas Klein. The Mishnah says, "Hanateya shtei shiur shel kishurin." If someone plants 2 rows of kishurin, either melons, cucumbers, sometimes one word is from the other one, but it's 2 rows of this vegetable. And shtei shiur shel diluin. And then right next to it are 2 rows of gourds, which some type of like pumpkins are gourds. Shtei shiur shel pula mitzvah. Then you have 2 rows of the Egyptian bean, and he was talking about it's not in a patch, rather it's in a large field. So you have 2 rows, 2 rows, 2 rows. So that's the Mishnah. So then mutter, it's going to be permitted. Why is it permitted? Because 2 rows are distinct to be considered their own field. And that's recognizable that each species is its own type. So even though it's in the one field, but you have 2 rows, 2 rows, 2 rows, you can tell that each row is its own thing. Now, shura achas, let's say it's only 1 row from each species. Shakishuan of the melons, of the shurach shel diluin, 1 row of gourds, shurach shel pula mitzri, 1 row of Egyptian beans. Then us it's going to be forbidden because that's considered being mixed together because it looks like it's one field of all these different types. But one thing you see, says the Gemara, is that you have 1 row is considered that it's mixed together. We don't say that the 1 row is going to separate it, because if the 1 row is separated, then you wouldn't have the way Tais explained. You wouldn't have the problem about the kishuin and the pula mitzri because it's being separated by something else. And that we say that no, 1 row is not considered as a separation. We would view it as the field itself. So on that you see that one talmud is not going to be it's going to be considered a problem about Klein. So the Gemara Shani Hoche, this mission is different in Klein because the ikus shracha, that what happens is that it gets entangled because the branches are very long, and on the top they're all mixing together, so it looks like it's mixed in many different places. Whereas in general, like Tais explains, in our halacha we're talking about thin seeds that they don't really go so deep, and therefore that's going to be mafsik, and therefore it's going to separate because it's not getting tangled on the top. Meaning, you're right, in the Mishnah Klaim, the 1 row is not going to be a separation because on the top, all the branches are just mixing together, they're interlocking, so it looks like Klaim. But here, the 1 row, the 1 seed here is just like seeds, and therefore it's very thin, and doesn't really mix with what's on the top. So therefore, that's why there is an opinion of Rav Asi that would hold that could be considered as a separation. So even though you don't have the 3 tvachim, but it looks like it's a furrow that's mixed in, and it's not really mixing on the top, therefore that's the reason of that opinion, why it would be considered not a problem about Klaim. Now, again, continuing on the halacha of our Mishnah, Rav Kahana, Rabbi Yechna, says, "Haretz lamalas kol ginasa yerek." You know, like my wife's family, they like call it chaparine. You want the chaparine. So what happens if you have a garden, you want to fill it with vegetables of many different types of species? You want to maximize your space. So says Rabbi Yechina, he says, I have a patent. And he says, I have an idea. What you do is Isa Aruga. So you make a patch, and all their patches were a square of shisha al shisha. So you're starting off with that parameter already. So the patch is 6 by 6 tvachim. Now, but what you can do is like this. He says, V'oigaba. What you can do is you can make a circle in every single patch. You can make a width of that circle chamisha. It's 5 tvachim. And you plant in that circle from one species, from one type. Now, that already is a recognizable dimension, and you don't have to distance anymore from that patch to another patch anything more, even though it's going to be, let's say, 2 tvachim, because you could tell that this is considered a separate entity. So you don't have to make really a distance in the width. Now, moreover, you could fill up the corners, which here in this picture we have on the sides, or it's the corners. You could plant in the corners whatever it is that you want to. What you could do is that you have a half a tefach that surrounds every single patch. You could fill it up from other types of things, because each one is a distinct dimension, a distinct shape that it's obviously that it's its own thing. You could tell, sometimes they have these designs of patterns of parades or whatever, and you could tell, even though they're all mixed together, it's a separate thing. Here also, when you have a whole species in one circle, it's going to be recognizable when you have the corners as something else. So therefore he says, you could chaparayim. What happens is now you don't have to make a distance between this and the other patch. And also, you could then even fill up the corners with something else. Because although you're doing a circle, now you have, empty space. Don't worry, you can fill up something else with that. And they're all considered distinct areas, and that's how you can chaparayim with your patch. But then the Gemara says, but it could debate beni. But the Gemara is bothered by the question. It says, what do you mean? You have the area in between. The Gemara is asking this as a question. Between the patches that we said before, when you have every patch 6 by 6, beyond the boundary itself, the Gemara is assuming, and this is the Gemara's question, it sounds like, you see, this is the border. So the way we drew it was the border was empty. The Gemara thinks that Rabbi Yechon is saying that you can even plant the border, which surrounds the square of the patches. That's going to be mixed with the other one. That looks like if you're filling up the whole patch, including the border, so then the one around it you're also filling up. So that definitely looks like, and you're doing a different species. So that definitely looks like Klein. So that's the Gemara. No, Amr Deber B'yan, he says, B'machrav bein benayim. We're talking about that the area of the border is not being planted. When Rabbi Yechon says you want to fill up the whole patch, it doesn't mean the whole garden, literally the whole garden is going to be full, that you literally can't even walk in over there. It just means every single patch is going to be full, but it's not talking about with the border. The borders of every patch are going to be empty, and that's how you're going to walk around, you're going to be able to water it. Therefore, that's one interpretation why it's not a problem of Klayim because of the borders. Rav Ashi, he actually gives a different interpretation. He says, no, it's even talking about that you're actually planting the borders. How does that work? He says like this: if the square of the patch was Zorin Shasi that you were planting with vertical, then you plant the Bein HaBinayim, the area between meaning the borders, you planted Arv, you planted horizontal. Arv, if the patch itself was planted on the horizontal, then Zorin Shasi, then you planted vertical. So in other words, yes, what you'll do is you'll have the borders of each one, you'll have that differential, you'll plant it with, let's say, one species. But the point is that it's not going to be problematic because it's going to be a different direction. A different direction will tell us that it's something distinct of each one. So you're not going to have a problem about Klein, whichever direction it means to say. If it means to say that you're going to plant them of one seeds. But the point is when you do a different direction, that itself shows us something else. Like we said, it doesn't have to be actual dimensions, it doesn't have to be actual distances. As long as you can tell it's something else, that'll take care of the problem of that you could even be planting the Bein HaBinayim, you can plant the whole field. How about that halacha? Yisrael Ravinu Rav Ashi. Ravinu asked Rav Ashi from the following brisa. The brisa tells us that avodas yerek b'yerek acher, the area of the working of one vegetable regarding another vegetable, meaning how much is the area of work that you have to distance from one to the other, the amount of work of shisha tvachim, which is the area of 6 tvachim, which is really the halacha of our Mishnah, that the 5 types of seeds, you want to be able to plant it, it has to be in the area of 6 by 6 tvachim. So it's explained the halacha of the Mishnah. It says the following words. It says, V'royin naisam, you see them, as we turn to Pei Vav Manal, kitavel meravas, like a square board, which is really like the dimensions of our Mishnah. Like you see a square board, 6 by 6 tvachim, and you'll have the 5 different types of seeds in that area. So the Gemara asks this as a question. Sounds like kitavlahu deshari, the only way we permit this halachic leniency of having different species in the area 6 by 6 tvachim, if it's like a square, halav hachi also, but if not, it would be forbidden. So you see, a circular dimension is not a patch, it's not an aruga to have the leniency. How could Rabbi Yechon say, oh, I have another chab. I have a chab that you could do it you could even chab more space. Make it in a circle, then fill up the sides, and then fill up the border. But it doesn't work as a circle. Like you see, the brisa qualifies, it has to be kitav l'mervaz. There's certain halachic requirements, like we said, what's considered a field. So we said that the Gemara is saying from the brisa, you see that the requirement is to be like a square. You make it like a circle, that's not an aruga. You're not going to have the leniencies of an aruga, of this halacha, of a patch, to have that you could have 5 and 6 by 6. That's only if you have the dimensions of what an aruga is supposed to be. that says the Gemara, no, Hasam over there, that you need it to be squared, is for a different significance. No, a patch could be circular too. It's only for it to be considered as a field. La kula bakula to have a different leniency. That's like we mentioned previously. Lahata roish tar hayotze hamena. To have the leniency of the roish tar, of the edge of the field going into another field. For that we said a chiddush that even if it's going into the other field, but it looks like the head of an ox, that it's the tail end of the field, I don't care, it goes into the other field, it's okay. What do you mean, this is grapes and this is this? Doesn't make a difference. You can tell it's from a different thing. Klaim is not about nourishing. Klaim is if it looks like it's mixed together, you can tell it's from a different field. For that leniency of roish tar, that you need to have that to be like a square. A circle is not going to have that leniency. That's not going to be considered as a sum. Now Rashi does point out, either you have to say Rabbi Yochanan does not hold, like we said before, that in Rosh Tar ba'aruga. We only say Rosh Tar by a field, and here we're talking about by a patch. He's saying that we're qualifying the patch, that 6 by 6 tvachim, that you're saying has to be squared. You tell me that's not for leniency of 5 different species. You tell me that's for leniency of Rosh Tar. But didn't we say previously Rosh Tar is only by a sada? So Rashi says, yeah, either Rabbi Yochanan doesn't hold like that. He holds like you have the leniency of Rosh Tar even by an aruga, or that you're right. He holds that there's no Rosh Tar from one patch to another patch. But from a field to a patch or a patch to a field, then we will say Rosh Tar, and that's why in this Rosh Tar we're saying that for this patch it won't have Rosh Tar if it's not in a square. But if it's a square, it will have Rosh Tar. But again, only because it's with a field. But if there's two patches, then you're right. He would agree that you don't say Rosh Tar. But again, it could be a circle, and therefore it has halacha does stand that you could have this circle, fill it up, and then you fill up the corners, and then you can even fill up the border, and go one direction, another direction, or don't fill up the border, and that's how you could have his chap of having filling up your whole garden, basically, maybe without the border, or maybe with the border, with all types of vegetables. Now, some of the ideas we spoke about in today's Daf and Shabbos Daf Pei was, how do we know the Rabbanan that they know the measurement of Yanika? That it's going to be, you could have 5 different types in 6 tvachim, which is primarily for the middle one and the sides. So how do they know this dimension? Who gave them this idea? How do we know that they know this agriculturally so proficient? So it says, yeah, we see that there's this tradition like the Seiri, they were Yeshli Ha'aretz, when everyone else lives in the sky. No, I mean, they were the Bekin in the Aretz. That's why they called the Chayri, because they were Marichin Ha'aretz, they would smell the land, or a different interpretation was because they became Bnei Chayri, they were taken over by the Bnei Esav, who took all their property. That's why they're called Chayri. And they were called Chivi, which is from, they would taste the land like a chivi, like a snake. And again, because they tasted it, they smelled it, they knew which soil is good for planting what and where and when, and therefore it's not so schwer, it's not so difficult to say that they knew also the shiur, and the rabbis got that knowledge just like as much as the Seiri. Now, additionally, we said that this that was in the patch, 6 by 6, that 6 by 6 has to be from the inside, is going to be 6 by 6. But the boundary, which is like we explained from a pasuk, is the width of a parsa, which is that of the tafach, that's going to be not a part of the 6 by 6. That's beyond that, and we know it has to be a border because it says v'shkisa b'raglecha, which a regal is that of a tefach. Therefore, that's not part of the 6 by 6. Now, Rabbi explained that the aruga of our Mishnah is b'chur v'shanina. It's talking about that there's no patches around that. It's just a singular patch. Why are we saying that? Because it's b'memal ha'kronis. It's talking about where you fill up the corners. If you fill up the corners, then you can't have, like we said, to pull one direction or one another direction. And then we said, but why? Why are you saying that? Say that, no, you could plant on the outside, meaning you could have patches on all the other sides. Why don't you say it's surrounded by patches, right? And don't fill up the corners. Don't fill up the corners, and then you'll be able to do when we said don't fill up the corners, it means say pull one direction, one another direction, and then you'll have the 3 tvachim that way. The Gemara says, no, it's a gezerah. Shemi Amalak corners, you might fill up the corners. And if you fill up the corners, you fill up the whole side, then you're stuck. You only have 2 tvachim from that patch and the other patch. It's not going to be good. And okay, forget about it. Let's say even if it doesn't have 2 tvachim, it's still Rosh Tar. The field ends off on a tail end. So no, it ain't Rosh Tar by Ruga. By Ruga, we don't say that halacha. And therefore, what are you showing a differentiation between this patch and that patch? It's only 2 tvachim. It's not going a different direction. We don't say Rosh Tar. And therefore, because that continues, you fill it up, you'll have that problem. Rav says it's only talking about B'chor v'shanim. Shmuel disagrees, and again, according to Rashi interpretation, he says no, it's even ben arugis, which is he just doesn't have the gzer like Rav. And yeah, when his words are benoita shulakan, basically means that thing when you have this field, you're going to only go here, and then you can have this patch, and you're only going to go over here. That means you pull one way, and therefore you can have 2 tefachim here, another tefach here. So you have 2 and 1. That's going to be the 3 tefachim that way. Then we said that if, let's say, you tear a furrow, one furrow in this aruga, you do, which is the dimension we're describing, one telem. So machlek is if the eruv is mabat lashur, which actually these words mefarshim have different ways of translating it, but does that mixture nullify not the row, it's the order, and it's a machlekes. And the Gemara says it's not a raya of a Mishnah Masechtas Klaim that says, oh, you see that when you have one row, one row, one row, one row, it's all going to be Klaim. So you see that this one row is going to be problematic as Klaim. It says because over there it's shracha. You have that the plants that they're on the top, they're all mixing together, and because of that, that's why it's problematic. But here we're talking about now row is a very thin seed. There it's not really mixing on the top. Maybe that one furrow would be considered as a distinct thing. Rabbi Yochanan said if someone wants to fill up his whole garden with vegetables, what he could do is he can make that patch of 6 by 6. Then he can make a circle of 5 tefachim in the middle, and then you fill up the corners, whatever you want to do. What's with the boundary? So with the border, either you're right, you're going to keep the border fallow, you're not going to go ahead and plant that, so that will be differentiation, which this is where you need the chazanish. So chazanish discusses, wait a second, who cares? But how does that help? It's still going to be only 2 tefachim. So he explains, because since it's an interesting dimension, therefore it'll work together with just being 2 tefachim. But the point is you leave the border, so it's not going to be a problem with the other patches. If you plant the actual row as chassis, you'll plant the border ariv, and that way you'll be able to have differential in that itself, in the direction, that would be considered as a separation. And we see in the Bryce has to be ketav muravas. That tav muravas, no, it could be a circle. It doesn't have to be a tav muravas. The reason why it's going to be the row is going to be a circle is because the tav muravas is only for the leniency of reish tar. To have reish tar, that has to be like a square because that's considered as an aruga or a field, only that way. And then when it tails off, that's going to be the leniency. But for the aruga itself, it could be as a circle. Thank you to any time for hosting us.